Yep.
Good evening, everyone. It is now about 6:01, and I'll call to order our February 9th Town Council meeting. If we could please take a moment of silence to reflect and respect on all those that currently serve and have in the past, protecting our democracy, safety, and freedom. Thank you all. In accordance with Mass General Law, this meeting is being audio and video recorded. If anyone in our audience is recording, could you please identify yourself? Looks like hearing and seeing none. Our meeting tonight is being virtually held through a Zoom webinar pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law. Jeannie, do we have anyone signed up for public comments?
No, no one has not.
Okay, how about council comments? Looking around the screen, no council comments at this point. Mary, do you have a report for us this evening?
Yes. Thank you, Mike. The report summarizes our activity since the last meeting in January. As you know, Chief DeLessio officially retired on the 15th of January, and Chief Williams has begun his employment with the town on the 19th. The transition seamless, I'm happy to say, and the new chief has begun his internal analyses of both personnel and infrastructure and physical premises needs. And one thing he's already proposed to me, which I have approved, is the expenditure for an audit of the evidence room. No one seems to know when the last time that was done. And regardless of when it was done, it should always be done when there's a transition to a new chief of police. So we're going to go forward with that. Mary Beth Dowd also has taken over her activities and her leadership of the Council on Aging at the tail end of December. She too has settled in quite nicely with staff and is analyzing the various programs that the COA offers and is very diligent about pursuing grants to try to find new ways to expand the service plan for people. She's been very great, cooperative. Obviously, she's let the town use her space for our own vaccination clinic that started last week and will continue for the foreseeable future. So she's also met with her board and has a lot of activities and ideas for future development. So quite pleased with what she's done so far. Joan Iwanicki began her employment as the town's HR manager on Monday of last week, February 1st. Elaine is sticking around for the short term just to provide some comfort level, I guess we'll call it, for Joan, and to bring her up to speed on the number of COVID-related matters that have really dominated the HR scene over the last 10 months. I personally have negotiations ongoing with several of the unions in town. I have a mediation scheduled tomorrow with the formerly known as the TEU union. Now they're an affiliate of a union that goes by the acronym UPSE, United Personnel Service Employees or something like that. I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me. But their contract expired last June, and we seem to be having some difficulty reaching an agreement on how to move forward. So I'll report on the strategy of that, obviously in an executive session if we can't resolve things quickly through this mediation prospect. There's also several matters in litigation that are pending that I won't go into any of the strategy of defense, but the four of our dispatchers from the emergency communications department that was disbanded last July 1 have sued the town alleging breach of contract. We think we have some defenses to that, which again, I'll elaborate on in a future executive session. And a former employee in our finance department has sued the town, alleging that she was not paid out appropriate compensation upon her departure. So again, that's a matter that will be addressed in executive session, but I just wanted the council to be aware that those 5 cases are pending in addition to the ongoing litigation from PLH and the solar project on Pease Road. So there's a lot going on in that area. Draft operational and capital budgets are being submitted. Most have already been submitted. Steve is putting them together, and we're going to sit next week to go over the initial review of those and then start with our capital committee and so forth. But we also met today with, Steve and I, that is, met with Gordon Smith and Pam Blair to comply certainly with the charter's requirement that we do so, but also to just have a general discussion about what the superintendent and the deputy superintendent for business anticipate for some of their needs for the upcoming fiscal year. And that, I think, was a very collegial and productive meeting. The outdoor skating rink has been a tremendous success. Can't give Donna Prather enough credit for the work she and Jordy have done to set up a schedule. They just sent out a constant contact email today with a schedule of available 2-hour blocks if anybody wants to sign up and take a spin on the ice. They've really gone out of their way to provide an activity for the community during this COVID winter of ours. They've also spent a lot of time, Donna and Jordy, that is, with me, presenting a reorg plan of sorts for their department. They currently have 2 vacancies. They lost Lindsay Sawyer back in March when she resigned. And then just recently, Tim LaRocca tendered his resignation. So they're looking for ways to maintain their efficiency and improve it. They recently purchased a new software program that hopefully will be more efficient to allow our community residents to sign up for things and sort of expedite that process that was taking up quite a bit of time for the administrative personnel in that department. So that's ongoing. As you know, the COVID vaccine, the local clinic for those 75 and older had its first run last Wednesday at the Council on Aging, as I said. And I give kudos to Amy and her staff, as well as Chief Morissette and the paramedics from his department who have serviced the community in this regard. I got a lot of feedback from both the clinic at St. Michael's Hall, which was in January, as well as the one at the COA, and one that was held at Bluebird Estates for those people in that congregate living situation. And all of the clinics have been run very professionally, organized very well, and everybody is taken care of. So far, so good. So that's a very praiseworthy accomplishment, and it's a ton of work. We have received preliminary grant approval for the acquisition of 2 generators that Bruce Fenney applied for through what's known as a BRIC grant. It's been approved by MEMA and has to go now to FEMA, but we anticipate that the final approval will be forthcoming soon. However, that project will remain on our capital planning documents until the final funding is available. Back on finance for just a moment, we did get our free cash certified. As you know, I sent that document out to the town council, and Steve and Olga have been working on correcting some of the deficits and some of the items which caused the balance in that account to be a little bit less than we anticipated. And we have a very thorough explanation for that if you want to go into it at this meeting or some future meeting. But it essentially, in a nutshell, money was spent on projects that were capital in nature before the bonding was completed during fiscal 19 and 20. And as a result of that, the the funds that were used to pay the vendors who did the work were considered somewhat of a offset to our free cash balance. As that rolls forward at the end of fiscal 21, those funds that have now been bonded will flow into the free cash. And I'll defer to Steve for any more particular explanation than that. But that was the big one, the 800,000 one on one of the school buildings. I have formed a capital advisory committee for fiscal 22. We have 2 counselors on it, 2 citizens, 2 lay people from the community, and Steve and myself, and we'll be beginning those reviews towards, it won't be next week, but it'll probably be the week after. So that, and our 10-year comprehensive plan is also underway and it's almost complete. So we'll be presenting that in this budget cycle as well. The planning board had a busy week towards the end of January with a hearing on the revocation of a special permit for the Pampered Pets dog daycare business at North Main Street. And they ended up at that hearing revoking the special permit, which kind of raises the issue of kennels, which is in your new business items that I'll explain a little bit more later, my thoughts on that. The annual town reports are being compiled by all the department heads. They're driveling in, but we have about half of them so far, so we're staying on top of that. The Friends of the Library were kind enough to come up with an additional $45,000 to refinish or to finish the carpeting project that was also lingering on our town's capital project list. So that work is going to be done at the end of February or the early part of March. And the work that they've done so far is beautiful. And it's all being done by Tomorrow Carpet. So we're very pleased and grateful to the Friends of the Library Association. As most of you know, the town police and fire departments stood in an honor guard along Maple Street a week or so ago on Thursday to honor the remains procession of Master Sergeant Scott Blaze, who died in a training accident in Hawaii on January 17th. Sergeant Blaze was a East Longmeadow resident. His children are in our schools and are very active in Pine Knoll activity program. So that was a very meaningful exercise, and I hope that it brought his family and loved ones some comfort. We also had a meeting of the Eastern Hampden District of the Department of Veteran Services. John Comerford is the local, is the East Longmeadow representative, employee of that separate entity. The district itself is his employer. But we had a meeting, and there are some plans now that I have asked John to make a video presentation with Don Mackey to educate or remind the public in East Longmeadow at least of what services he can provide and those that he cannot provide by law. I think there's been some confusion over the years with respect to John's responsibilities and abilities in terms of what kind of advice that he can provide to people who are seeking assistance from the Veterans Administration. Master Plan Steering Committee held a meeting not too long ago at which the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission presented a lengthy PowerPoint assimilation of a number of data points that will be key in determining components of the master plan. Bethany Yau's doing a terrific job there, working under that grant that she obtained for the master plan. And so there's a big, hopefully a large attended Zoom meeting this coming Saturday between 10 and 12 called a visioning session, whereby we're hopeful that all members of the community who have any opinion about their thoughts for the future of East Longmeadow would take part in that Zoom meeting to offer the Master Plan Steering Committee, as well as Bethany and myself and the council, an opportunity to hear and have input from the people who have a vested interest in the community. So we're hoping that that's well attended, and we think it will be. Last but not least, the department heads had a meeting last Friday, a very collegial meeting where we discussed with one another the ongoing projects and tasks in each department and some of the, day-to-day difficulties that everybody's grappling with. But they're very supportive of me and each other, and we're delighted that we can meet at least every 6 months or so to have that sense of community and cooperation among the department heads. And lastly, the board of directors for Westcom, of which your town manager is a member. There's 4 directors. They met twice last week, mainly to discuss the closing details on that building formerly known as Salter College on Schwinnigan Drive, which is going to be the new site of the Emergency Communication Center. And then, of course, the fiscal 22 budget was a subject of discussion. So we had a busy month, busy few weeks, and I think you're up to date now from what I can tell you.
Thanks, Mary. I appreciate it. Any questions for Mary pertaining to the report tonight? Don?
Yeah, hi, Mary. Is the link that the invite for the Zoom meeting for this Saturday, is it going to be on our town Facebook page as well as our webpage?
It'll certainly be on the webpage, and I think Bethany probably will post it on Facebook as well, but I'll check with her tomorrow to make sure.
Thank you.
Okay, Pat?
Thanks, Mike. Hi, Mary. Question on COVID. There was a wait list for age 75ers.
Yes.
How far down the list did they get?
I was told a couple of days ago that there were like 850 names on that wait list, and we had 100 doses given to us. And then there were a few extras from the prior clinic. So I think they vaccinated 163 people last week. So there's a ways to go on that 75 and over
Thanks.
list.
Yep.
Tom?
Mike, Mary,
Yes.
I've been hearing that the clinic will take place 2 days this week. Is that correct?
I have not heard that.
So which day is it? Wednesday or Thursday?
I was told it was going to be next Thursday, not next Thursday, this Thursday.
This Thursday, okay.
But
And the
that could have
time-
changed today. People went home early, Tom. It was snowing, and
Yeah.
I don't know. I haven't talked to Amy since about 3 o'clock this afternoon. So if there's
Okay.
been a change beyond that point, I'm not aware of it.
Okay.
But so
thank
far
you.
as I knew, there was just going to be the 1 day because they're still limited to the 100 doses.
Right.
I was up at St. Mike's today, and the whole process went very, very well. The only thing I'd like to add so that everyone realizes that wherever you received your first shot is where you will receive your second shot. Some people obviously are receiving them up at St. Mike's on Summers Road, and the second location obviously is the COA. So my first shot was at St. Mike's, and my second shot was today. But again, wherever you received your first shot, that's where you can expect to have your second shot. And the whole event, again, our staff has done an excellent job coordinating everything that's taken place up there. It's obviously, the vaccines can only be administered as the town has these vaccines appropriated for distribution, but nothing's gone to waste. Anyone that didn't show up, those were passed along to other residents, and they were able to take opportunity with that. So they've done a great job with it. So if there's no other questions for Mary, I believe everyone's had the opportunity to look at the open session minutes from January 12th, and I'll entertain a motion to accept.
I'll make a motion to approve the open session minutes of the January 12th, 2021 Town Council meeting.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, the motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion pertaining to the minutes? Hearing and seeing none, we'll roll call vote this. Don Anderson,
Yes.
I'm a yes as well. Marilyn,
Yes.
Kathy,
Yes.
Pat,
Yes.
Tom,
Abstain?
and Ralph?
Yes.
Okay, it looks like 6 in favor, 1 abstained. The motion passes. I don't believe we have anything under communications and correspondence this evening. There are no public hearings. Under orders of the day, I'm going to rely on Kathy under licensing matters for an update on everything that's taken place with licensing.
Thank you, Mike. The licensing committee met on January 13th after an approach from one of the licensees who is currently or had applied back in the fall for an extension of the outdoor dining. And the query was, could the establishment continue with outdoor dining, or did the council need to take additional action? So that was the reason for the committee to get together. And after some discussion and trying to sort out the status of things, the committee determined that based on Governor Baker's state of emergency, certain permissions were granted for outdoor dining application back in the fall, and that the long and short is that our council also voted in the fall that the outdoor dining permit would be remain in force until 60 days beyond the time that the governor lifts the state of emergency. So the answer for the licensee was very positive in that he could go forward with his outdoor dining plans. While we were together as a committee, I asked the committee to catch up on some old business that had gotten by us in the fall, and that was that relative to the subcommittee taking a look at the fee schedule for all licenses, alcohol-related licenses, back in late 2017, we all put some language into the bylaw that said that the fee schedule would be reviewed every 2 years. Well, that should have happened in late 2020, and as I said, it got by us. So after some discussion around the status of commerce today, in light of the pandemic, the committee voted unanimously to recommend to the council that the council maintain the alcohol licensing fee schedule as is through December 2022. So that would give it like a stay put on the actual fees until that time, in consideration especially of the fact that there was a significant jump when we originally did this in late 2017, and most especially to help our small businesses who have the alcohol licenses try to gain back some footing, post-pandemic and get back on their feet with their businesses. And that was the extent of our meeting. We've not set a subsequent date to meet, and that would only be pending more quote unquote business to attend to. So if there are no questions to that, then I would ask that someone make that motion that we keep the fee schedule in place through December of 2022.
Okay. Could we have a motion in reference to Kathy's suggested motion?
I move that the town retain the existing licensing fees for 2021 and 2022.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Pat, and thank you, Marilyn. We have a motion. The motion's been seconded. Is there any further discussion? Don?
Just to be clear on the motion, this only fees as it impacts alcohol.
Correct. That's what I would add to.
Yeah, because I know there's questions about our fee schedule, our fee structure regarding selling soda and potato chips and ancillary type things. This doesn't impact that, just alcohol, correct?
Correct.
Yes.
Yes.
Any other questions? Hearing and seeing none, we'll start with a roll call vote again. Don?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Marilyn?
Yes.
Kathy?
Yes.
Pat?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
And Ralph?
Yes.
Thank you. 7-0, the motion passes. Before we move to our financial matters here, well, we have Kathy front and center. I had a conversation with Gordon this week and pertaining to our meeting that's about to take place. And I just wanted to say thanks to Kathy and from the entire town council, we all feel the way, and our manager, for the appointment to the committee, which will enable her to be able to participate in the direction and the future of our high school. All committee members have to be accepted after being submitted by MSBA. So that has taken place, and I just learned that everyone was accepted, and I'm very excited, Kathy being part of the council, that after all her years of dedication as a career educator and a principal, you know, your talents are much appreciated, and will make Kathy an excellent choice to represent the council, the school committee, and our town moving forward as we move through the process. There's going to be a lot of heavy lifting with this committee that will be spooling up sooner than later, and we couldn't be better represented by the council to have one of our own on that committee. So Kathy, thanks for stepping up and making that happen.
You're very welcome and thank you. It's one of my favorite things to do is build schools, be on committees to build schools. This will be my second one and I'm honored and really excited about it.
Okay, and it definitely shows. So moving along here under financial matters, as the charter stipulates, we are going to have our joint meeting with the school committee right now. So Don, if we could convert the attendees into panelists, that would be great. And here they are. Go on.
Hi, everybody.
Hi there.
Hello.
So it looks like everybody's here. I don't know what you're seeing. I'm seeing one screen blank down in my lower left corner, but anyway, Pam, Gordon, Greg, welcome everybody, and the entire committee as well. We're happy to have you here and keep this process moving along. I think probably what we would want to do first, and I'll leave this up to Greg. Would you like to formally open your school committee meeting?
Yes, I would please, if
Great.
I could be indulged. Just to reiterate, President Kane, again, thank you, Councilor Hill, for agreeing to join the building committee. A lengthy process. We're thankful that she's willing to lend us her expertise. So I just want to reiterate that. With that, I will call to order the meeting of the school committee. This is our February 9th joint meeting with the town council. Call the meeting to order. It is 6:30. Joined today by School Committee Vice Chair Sarah Trulio, William Fonseca, Beth Marzian-Boucher, Antonella Rochilla. We have our Superintendent Gordon Smith and our Assistant Superintendent for Business, Pamela Blair. Thank you.
Okay. While you're formally open, whoever, like, Tom, do you have a question before we get started?
Yeah, I don't know if it's my mic or Greg's, but I could barely understand or hear him. Is it a possibility to turn your mic up?
Yeah, how's that, Tom? Is that better? Is that better, Tom? You hear me now?
Yeah, I guess there's a delay.
Now there's a delay. Yeah, the audio's better though, Greg. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
thank you.
I'm on.
I noticed
Thank you, Tom.
improvement myself, so. Okay. Greg, take it away.
Well, as you said, President Kane, simply here to kick off the budget season. Always excited for this time of year. As you all know, and we all know, it's a lot of work put forth by all the town committees collectively to come up with how we fund and operate the budget on an annual basis. So in fulfilling the charter, we're here to meet with you all today, see some of your thoughts on the budget development process. Specifically today, if we could talk about process, timelines, and also what the council's objective is for this year's budget, we certainly would be open to that discussion and that information.
All right. Sounds good. Does anyone have any questions at this point in time on the direction that we'll be taking? No. Okay.
So if I could, President Kane,
Please.
as we start to develop a budget, we start to get initial thoughts from the council, from the town manager. We talk about things about level services. We talk about level funding. We talk about 1%, 2%, 3% increases. As the council has discussion on a target area in which they're looking for departments to come in budgetary wise, we certainly recognize the uniqueness of this year with COVID. So we would look for any kind of guidance that the council might have in that department.
Thank you. Some of my questions were answered. As I stated earlier, I was able to have a great conversation with Gordon, and I understand a lot of the components like our budget are missing, and a big one for you might even be vendors that are supplying all the food to the school at this point in time. So we understand there are many components missing, but we have to start somewhere. And I guess I'd call on Mary because she'll be working through the budget here. And do you have any discussion you want to share with
Well, sure, Mike. As I said earlier, Steve and I met today for over an hour with Gordon and Pam, and my directive and under Steve's signature was that all departments should submit level funded budgets. So that's what most people are trying to do, but they're also entitled to submit us their wish lists. But the conversation with Pam and Gordon essentially talked just about the generalities of where Chapter 70 funding was, what level that was at according to the governor's budget. We had a brief conversation about whether or not the Student Opportunity Act was going to be in addition to the Chapter 70 money that is increased $73,000 over last year's budget. However, that's just the governor's budget. The legislature hasn't had a chance yet to either approve it or make amendments to it. We talked briefly about the foundation budget and certain other aspects of funding that the school district might have available to it. Some of the grants, the ESSER grant and the, let me get this right, Pam, the CVRF. And we listened to their presentation about some of the problem areas in fiscal 21 about the loss of revenue and how some of the, obviously the COVID related problems have affected the school district as much or more than many other departments. So my message to them was, I like to think big, but I'm also very mindful that elected officials need to think about tax rates. So as much as I would like to work very proactively with the school district and every other department in town to improve operations, to upgrade some positions, to increase our efficiency and our level of service, I realize that many of those objectives that I have are not going to be realized this year for sure. And I'm pretty sure I imparted that message to Gordon and Pam. we know that everybody is struggling. We know the sacrifices and the cuts that the school committee voted last year in order to meet the budget proposal that we had talked about in 21. I'm optimistic and hopeful that COVID will abate or somewhat ebb as the months go by, so that our budget process this year will not be as frenetic and fractured as it was last year. I've asked Gordon and Pam to set a target with the school committee of having at least a draft budget to my office by March 15th, because my draft has to go to the council by April 1st. They have third-party vendor amounts, obviously, that they don't know yet, as was just mentioned, as do many departments in the town side of things. We don't have our insurance rates for either liability or health. So there's a lot of moving parts still. So that draft may well be a draft, but we're hoping certainly that we'll stay as close to level funding, but for contractual increases that are necessary. Gordon mentioned that they're negotiating currently with Unit A teachers union, and obviously there are always those issues to consider when you're making your budget. And our town, on the town side, we have one union that, as I said, expired June 30th. Their contract expired, and the police union is coming up this June 30th. So we've got plenty of union talk ahead of us as well. So my hope for a level funded budget, I think, is not realistic, but that's going to be the baseline that I would recommend to the council, and we'll make as few increases to that, looking for other sources of funding and whatnot as we possibly can. But it's going to be another tight year. The town's revenue is keeping pace with last year. I'm very happy to say our real estate collections are where they should be. We took a significant hit in our interest account. But, you know, I don't have to tell anybody who's listening to this that the economy still obviously has not recovered. There's still a great deal of unemployment. There's still a lot of food insecurity, and a lot of people are suffering. So we can't just, you know, go forward full steam ahead as much as we would like to at times. So just trying to, I know that's a lot of stuff in one bowl for now, but sooner or later we'll stir it up and we'll figure out where we're going to land. But so Pam, I can see you nodding at me, so you can you know, jump in anytime if you've got anything you want to add.
Wanted to say you CVRF, you got that right. Coronavirus Relief Fund. Nicely done, Mary.
Thanks, Pam. President Thompson, anything else, or any members of your committee, or anything from Superintendent Smith, please bring it forward. We'd be happy to listen.
Yeah, a couple things. Just as long, in terms of the grants, we have received some federal money this year, fortunately, state money for COVID-related expenses, and we've used them. As you all know, we are back in school in a hybrid learning model. We have students in the building every day. We have had students all the way through, but we brought a good deal amount of students more back in starting January 19th. Certainly grateful for our teachers and all of our staff for the work they've done. And as I said, we've allocated a lot of those funds for PPE, additional cost. We've hired some substitute teachers on a permanent basis to cover staffing issues that are inevitable during these COVID times with quarantines and isolations. And that's working out successfully. And so far, so good. In terms of increasing the amount of students in the classroom, and we're thankful for that. Also focusing on those students that are still learning from home, some 1 week on, 1 week off, and some still at home all the time learning virtually. The other thing I wanted to bring up is the process of the budget. As you all know, picture on the screen tonight and at this virtual table is the executive and legislative boards of this town. The school committee and town manager representing the executive branch, and the town council as legislative. as we go forward in the budget process, the school committee collectively would like to follow the charter in submitting our budget, as we have done in the past, directly to the town manager. And then the expectation is that the town manager passes the budget along to the town council. From that point, it's the purview of the council, we feel, to do with our budget as they wish. If you want to send it to a subcommittee, that would be your purview. But we feel that we as an executive board would prefer to deal directly with the council in discussing our budget and questions, concerns that the council might have. We're always here willing to discuss, but would prefer to keep it at a elected board level than a non-elected board level. And I say that because a non-elected board who filters the school committee's budget to the town council doesn't provide the full budget to the town council. So then who becomes responsible for that budget? So if I could just ask this year, in terms of process, if we just follow the charter and have communication perhaps be between the president of the council and the school committee chair, certainly to filter out through its members, copying in the town manager, certainly the superintendent would be relevant too. I wonder if the council understands and will be willing to follow that process this year.
Okay. I know I'll have conversations with other council members and Mary as well. And obviously over the past years, we do have a budget finance committee that has done a lot of the heavy lifting for us before it was dropped on the council's lap. But we'll see what we can do with the entire picture here. So yeah, anything else, or does anyone have any questions for the school committee or President Thompson at this point, or Superintendent Smith? Tom?
Greg Gordon, have we heard anything from the state with regards to the necessity to do more filings about what our school plan is going forward for in-class, hybrid, or are we going to stay with our current plan?
Yeah, no, Tom, thank you for that. So we are working with the state. As you know, we were audited by Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. We have laid out our plans. Currently, as I said, we're in the hybrid model, and we're going to stay with the hybrid model mostly because of CDC and DPH guidelines that require 6 feet social distancing. The truth of it is we can't fit the students, all of them, in at one time at 6 feet social distancing. So when CDC and DPH say that 6 feet requirement is no longer a guideline, then that's really what would trigger a change in learning model. We're hoping and being realistic on vaccinations being the catalyst that gets us there. And as we look, as Mary discussed on the onset, vaccinations are a little bit slow right now, but we're still hoping that by this summer, vaccinations start to create herd immunity, which will help us to drop that 6 foot distancing requirement, which would then allow us to get back into full in-person schooling.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Any other questions? All right.
President Kane, if I may add, to reiterate, I thought our working meeting today with Mary and Steve was an excellent one, and we hope to continue that through this process. Some of the positives that we did share, and Mary mentioned this, the governor's budget, at least as proposed, Chapter 70, is hopeful, and we're also hoping that the 73,000 increase is not necessarily tied to student opportunity, that possibly that's another increase that might be coming. We have to do some more research on that. But certainly we want to work collegially and put a budget together that makes the most sense for not only the school department, but also the town. One of the things we did discuss, and I know all of you know this, is that the challenges that the last year have presented have been monumental and probably forever altering in a good way. We're learning a lot about how we use technology and how we use that well. It's keeping our hybrid model going in terms of having students not only in front of the teacher, but also live streaming to the students in that class. And although there are always technology glitches, overall, it's been a great success. And we know there are going to be elements of that as we move into the next school year that we're going to have to maintain. With that said, we also know that a lot of what we're looking at is we look at, say, positions lost. We may need to be very creative about, because needs next year will both be dealing with learning gaps, but probably most importantly, dealing with students' social emotional growth and figuring out how we best support students. Because if they're not in a place socially and emotionally to learn, it won't matter what we put in front of them in terms of the curriculum and strategies for how we implement that curriculum. So those are some of the things that we discussed today and hope to continue to discuss not only in that work group, but with all of you.
Thanks, Gordon. When we were talking earlier in the week, I was just wondering if you could give the council a brief description of what we talked about the learning process, that while people are in the classroom, that there is I want to say, a spin-off where everyone that's at home is still going to enjoy this, the same educational experience, because everything is being taped and broadcast. So could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure. So as Mr. Thompson said, we're in a hybrid model. So what that means is that we have our students grouped in cohorts. We have an A cohort, we have a B cohort. Those two cohorts alternate weeks, meaning that currently we are in I believe a B cohort week. And so this is our 4th week of hybrid. And so students in the B cohort come to school in person for the entire week. Students in the A cohort are home, but they engage each of their classes on the secondary level and certainly their homeroom class on the elementary level via Google Meets. And our teachers who, really, I can't say enough about all of our staff with what they've been able to make happen this year. It's been pretty incredible. But the teachers and the paraprofessionals in the classroom then are utilizing not only their computer, but they're also utilizing, in many cases, a webcam where they can give different views of the classroom to the students at home, and a larger monitor so that the students, not only in the teacher and paraprofessional, can see all the students at home. So it's not exactly the same as, just say, looking at the screens you may be looking at right now. It's on a larger scale. In some cases, teachers have projected that onto their screen or whiteboard in the classroom. In many cases, the students at home may stay on that extra screen, and the teacher may be sharing something with the folks at home on their computer, and see it then on the whiteboard or the screen in the front of the room. And so it's really balancing a few different skill sets to manage that, not only in terms of how you plan for that, but then also how you implement that. And we are working through, and I can't say enough about Ryan Quimby's department and crew. We're working through any technological glitches that we've had. And I hope over the February break, we'll be able to iron out a number of them so that as we return, we're not seeing glitches in any of the classrooms.
Thank you, Gordon. I did have residents ask me and did feel that, while some of the children were in classes, that the other children were basically absent from that subject matter that might have taken place. So hopefully this clarifies that. I think it's great because I think they're still able to at least connect with their classmates while they're learning, which is just a healthy environment for all. So I'm glad we were able to talk about that and clarify it on tape here so that more people learn about how the educational experience is actually unfolding.
Sure.
Does anyone else have any other questions at this point in time, or President Thompson, is there anything else? I see Pam's hand up. So.
I just wanted to take this opportunity to remind folks out there that, the town council, you all supported that one-to-one. I think it was 2 years ago now. And, thank goodness that you did that, because it really, when this pandemic hit, we were far ahead of other districts, and we truly, truly appreciate that support. And, nothing's perfect. We're having some other issues with our teachers' computers. They are old, and we're working on that with Ryan's department. And again, thank goodness for some of these grants that are coming in that are helpful in purchasing the technology. So thank you.
Thank you, Pam. Anyone else at this time?
If I may, I was just going to say that to piggyback off what Pam just shared, that foresight is, I think, what we have to consider as we enter into this budgeting season, that we are going to be dealing with both academic and social emotional gaps. And we need to be prepared for what that's going to bring, not only to our district next year, but over the next few years. And we want to be able to meet those challenges with the same foresight that the one-to-one program allowed us to meet this current situation with. So as we make those considerations and as we think about budgets, to remember that foresight that we had to implement one-to-one is really what made this manageable in a lot of ways. And we need to consider that as we move forward to think about what the challenges are going to be in the very near future. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Anyone else? Well, I guess I'd like to thank everybody for joining us and helping us to fulfill our obligation to comply with the charter under Article 6, Section 1. And President Thompson.
Yeah, if I could, Mike, quickly, just with my peers, acknowledge Ryan and his staff for IT, but also Bruce and his staff for getting the buildings ready for more in-person learning. Ventilation was a very big issue this year as well. So certainly all the departments working collectively together. It's good to be part of this town. We are one East Long Meadow, so we continue to work that way. So just wanted to give that plug. And with that, if you don't mind, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn from my board, Mike.
So moved.
Motion's been made by Bill.
Seconded.
Second by Beth. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. That motion carries 5-0. Mike and everybody else, I want to thank you all for your time tonight, and look forward to working with you all going forward on the budget.
Likewise,
Thank you.
thank you all for joining.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good night, all.
Take care.
Thank you.
All right. There we go. Now I've got a condensed screen, a little easier to follow here. Continuing under financial matters, I would entertain a motion to approve funding of, from fiscal year 2020. It would come out of free cash for the prior year's bills for Meadows Health Center invoices.
Kathy, you're muted.
And I was so fluent with that motion too. I move that the council approve the funding of $2,255 from the FY20 free cash for prior year's bills for the Meadows Health Center invoices.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing and seeing none. Don Anderson?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Marilyn Richards?
Yes.
Kathy Hill?
Yes.
Pat Henry?
Yes.
Tom O'Connor?
Yes.
And Ralph Page?
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you. On the same subject matter, I'll entertain a motion, again from fiscal year 2020, free cash for prior year's bills for services utilized by the dispatch department.
Mike, I move that we approve the funding of $6,077.50 from FY20 free cash for prior year's bills for services utilized by the dispatch department.
Thank you, Ralph.
I'll second that.
And thanks for the second, Tom. Any further discussion?
Mike, I'm
Ralph?
just curious what the bills were, if it was just normal operational and we just ran over budget, or was it something that we weren't expecting?
Mary or
Can you bring in, or can Don Mackey bring in Chief Morissette? Because he received those bills. I think it was bills that were not submitted timely, and
He's on
that's
his
why
way.
they're prior year's bills, but I see Paul's with us now, so.
Yep.
okay.
Except you're muted, Chief.
Don,
Everybody.
we'll bring him in. Here he is. Hi, Paul.
Hey, Paul.
Hi, Chief.
So there's 3 bills. One is for the annual service that was emailed to the director a couple of weeks after he no longer was with the town. And 2 of them were 6 months prior to that for training of two employees. The first time I saw them was about a week and a half ago. I forwarded them to Steve, and he said, oops. And we tried for some assistance from the company, but with no assistance, we weren't able to do anything, unfortunately. It was an error on somebody's part that was uncaught.
So we're cleaning up 2020.
Perfect.
Any other
We
questions?
could refuse to pay and be sued because they were services rendered, so in equity, the funds are actually due. Just,
Right.
you know, for your comfort level on spending that money.
Yep.
Any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none. Don Anderson?
Yes.
I'm a yes as well. Marilyn?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Pat?
Yes.
Ralph?
Yes.
And Kathy?
Yes.
Thank you. That motion passes as well. And while we have Chief Morissette here, I think it's a good time to have him remain on scene. So a motion to approve funding in the amount of $17,696 from FY 2020 free cash to replace damaged firefighters' gear not covered by insurance. I think we're all aware of the fire that took place over the last week or so, and the negative repercussions from that fire did some damage to equipment we have. I think right now it's important to have that equipment replaced. I'm sure we all feel the same way, and we will figure out how we fund this. Right now, the insurance is going to cover part of it, but I'll let our chief elaborate on the facts I just presented.
Yes, like President Kane said, we had a fire at Quad Graphics. It's a pretty good sized industrial complex, 170,000 square feet or so. Contained to 2 machines inside, probably the largest machines, very big printing presses that print your flyers that you see in the paper every Sunday or on Thursdays, including a reminder. Machines are valued at $20 million each. For the company itself, they had 5 more up front, so they were able to pick up production in the front side of the facility a couple of days after the fire. But they have 40 facilities across the country where they were actually shipping other stuff. The issue on our part was it was a very smoky fire, a lot of oil and a lot of ink mixed in with the water that was the runoff from the sprinklers and our fire protection. The firefighters' boots, the gear, their gloves sustained considerable stainage from these byproducts, and we've tried cleaning them in our commercial cleaner, different detergents, and it's just not coming clean. Still has the odor of the oil. If anything were ever to happen, we would ultimately be liable for the gear's not up to standards where it should be. I reached out to an insurance company. Unbeknownst to me, it's the first time I've ever tried calling the insurance company for this. We only have a $10,000 limit on our property per se for the fire and police departments. I spoke with Mary shortly afterwards. Maybe we should up it in the future, but I've been a fire chief for 9 years and we've never put a claim in before. So maybe this is the best avenue. It's a $16,000 or a $17,000 hit, but and we get 10,000 from the insurance company and we move on. And the guys are right now. The guys still have the gear. It's dried. It's in service, but ultimately we need to get it replaced.
Marilyn, just one moment, please. So, you know, you mentioned 9 years, nothing like this has happened in the past. So it's financially, the way I look at it, it's not the worst thing that could have happened. We could have paid much more expensive premiums, but we got away with those premiums for 9 years. And hopefully there's an offset against the $17,000. So right now, most importantly, we restaff that department with the equipment they need in case we have a fire in the future. That being said, Marilyn, I saw your hand up.
Thank you, Mike. On a personal aside, this is reminiscent of August of 1988, before all of you were born, when the old Water Shops Armory building chlorine fire took place. It was a 16 alarm fire and East Long Meadow responded, and all the equipment that we used at that fire had to be replaced.
Yep.
Because the chlorine just destroyed everything. So it's happened before, at least to me. And so it's just part of doing business and saving lives. And so I have no problem with it.
Thank you. I'm going to get to everybody. Pat, I see your hand up. Yeah.
Thank you, Mike. Just a quick question. Is that $10,000 coverage, does that go against the 17 or was the total loss 27, Paul?
Total loss was 27.
Thanks.
Don?
Well, Pat asked the first question, but the second question is, so all the event that led to this happened just a couple weeks, within the last couple weeks. Why are we taking the free cash out of fiscal 20? Shouldn't it be out of fiscal 21?
I guess that's a question for Steve.
The free cash for fiscal 21 won't be settled until this time next year. So we have the free cash now, which can be utilized during this year for unexpected expenses like this.
Okay.
So it would be the fiscal year 20 free cash.
Thank you.
Ralph?
Question on the insurance. Is it the town's insurance that has to cover this? Or shouldn't it be where you're fighting the fire, their insurance should pay for any damage?
There is a possibility that may come through. Unfortunately, that would take a lot longer than it would take. It's a 2-month lead time.
Yeah.
To get the stuff ordered, and I don't want to order it banking on that. If we do get insurance, a payout from their insurance company, that would of course come back this way, and we would put the money back in the system.
Okay, so it is something we're looking into. I don't mind spending the money. I think you guys need all the protection. Absolutely. I was just curious.
Mary?
You also, there might be the issue of having an insurable interest in the property that was damaged. So the coverage for quad may not cover losses of third parties like the East Long Meadow Fire Department. I mean, that's one aspect of it. But if we get reimbursed, that would be great, and we'll replenish the free cash. But the other issue that it raises on a bigger picture is we've tried to reassess a lot of our coverages. And Paul makes a good point that this is his first claim since 2012 in his tenure as chief. And I guess Mike was affirming that fact. You know, we could increase our coverage across the board. Our electronics coverage is shy. Our deductibles are low. We can increase deductibles, but it's an analysis that has to be made by every department. And we're somewhat in the superficial aspects of that in the creation of our comprehensive capital plan, because we're putting together all of our fixed assets and trying to determine replacement values and things of that nature. So the whole issue of coverage and the liability amounts that we can afford and the risk that we're willing to take is another very hefty topic that we need to spend some time on.
Okay. Any other, Pat?
Last point, I just want to commend Chief Paul because the material that he presents to us always covers exactly what we would ask for if we needed it. He explained where it came from. He explained all the efforts they went through to try to ameliorate the process. And unfailingly, Paul, the stuff you give us is spot on, and we appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. If there aren't any further questions, I'll entertain a motion to fund.
I move that we approve the funding of $17,696 from FY20 free cash to replace damaged firefighters' gear. $17,696 being the portion of the claim not covered by the insurance company.
I'll second that motion.
Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none. Marilyn Richards?
Yes.
I am a yes. Don Anderson?
Yes.
Kathy Hill?
Yes.
Pat Henry?
Yes.
Tom O'Connor?
Yes.
And Ralph Page?
Yes.
Thank you. The motion passes. Chief Morissette, thank you for all the information. It makes
Thank you.
it's very easy to come to a decision, a unanimous decision, and keep up the great work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
Here, Chief.
Okay. Currently, we have no old business under new business. We'd like to talk about the situation with the kennels in town, and I will defer to Mary for all the work and time she's put into this to help us with questions and answers.
Thanks, Mike. Essentially, this issue came up as a consequence of that dog, I guess, incident, I'll call it, at Pampered Pets on October 5th or 6th of 2020. That's a doggy daycare, and apparently at that time and place, there was a dog fight and one dog was seriously injured. And when it was all reported through the animal control officer, she went out to the site and actually issued a letter to the proprietor indicating that the woman had no kennel license, and she was ordering her to get a kennel license within 10 days or be fined. And so that's what brought the issue to my attention, because our bylaws don't allow for kennel licenses. The lady was operating the premises by virtue of a special permit. So I reached out to town council because the Massachusetts general law requires kennels for businesses which run doggy daycares. You don't have to be an overnight boarding facility, and there's not a limitation on what you do with the dogs or how long they stay there in order to meet the definition of kennel. So we had at the time 2 businesses in town that were operating daycares for dogs, neither of which has a kennel license. So through no fault of their own, they both have special permits, but through no fault of their own, they're in violation of Massachusetts general law. So Jesse Belcher Tim's law firm just wrote a brief memo, which I think was forwarded to you by the town clerk, in which he suggests that the council consider amending the bylaws to allow for kennel licenses to be issued so as to eliminate the violation with Mass General Law, but then impose conditions on the kennel license similar or exactly the same as the planning board imposed on the special permits that have been granted in the past, so that you effectively, as I said, eliminate the unwitting violation of mass law, and you don't necessarily have to interfere with the town's preference for a zoning bylaw that would prohibit kennels. So it's really your decision as to how you want to proceed, if you want to proceed at all. So.
Thanks, Mary. I'm looking now around the room here. Any questions for me? Oh, okay. Pat, I'm sorry. Ralph?
So I'm going to start with our bylaw specifically differentiates between a commercial kennel, which I believe we only have one in town, Porter Road Pet Kennel, and that is a grandfathered in, and a daycare pet grooming. But from what I understand is a kennel license doesn't necessarily have to be just for a commercial. It can be for private if you have more than 5 dogs at your house.
The definition can be very expansive. There's a lot of different types of business entities that fit in that definition. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
So wouldn't this make more sense to, as a condition under the special permit? You know, because we don't allow commercial kennels and we allow doggy daycares under special permit, under the special permit state that the dog daycare must have a kennel license, although this does not allow them to board animals overnight. So that way there, they have to have a license. Then they go to the town to get the license and we set the fees and all that way.
I think that's exactly how Jesse's memo would anticipate it would play out. Because right now, if we say you have to have a license, we'll give you a special permit and you have to have a kennel license, but they cannot get that kennel license currently. At least that's how I interpret his memo. And I will readily admit, this is not an area of expertise of mine.
So sorry, Mike, to follow up, we currently issue a kennel license because we give one to Porter Road, correct?
Yes.
So I don't know, do we need a fee structure for a kennel license or something on that idea? Is there already one set by Mass General Law?
I don't think there's a fee schedule in the Mass General Law. I think the town could set one.
Mike, through the chair.
Tom, do you have any additional information?
Yeah, I'd just like to chime in here. What Ralph stated is correct, but we also have private kennels. In the private kennels, there is a process for them to get a kennel license through the clerk's office. And private kennels would include rescues and breeders. And that's always been a process in the past. I think there's a disconnect, as we all know, between the bylaw and the process to license kennels. So what I like to make a motion on and recommend is that this get moved to the bylaw committee to be reviewed and put together a process that takes into consideration both of these issues.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay.
So Mike,
Yeah.
I think Tom just made a motion. I'm going to second that for further discussion. And if you don't mind, I'll jump in. So the bylaw committee wouldn't be writing a bylaw or anything. I think what we're looking at is just maybe even the licensing committee to set fees or whatever for the cost of a kennel license. I mean, I just, like I said, it's more a discussion item. I mean, that would be my thought process, that we already have the bylaw. The bylaw already distinguishes between a commercial kennel, doggy daycare. As long as the special permits state that they need a kennel license, then this goes to how are we going to issue the license?
Yeah.
Tom?
There already is a process to do that, and there are fee schedules that were used in the past. I know we've had a lot of changes in town hall, and maybe this has slipped through the cracks, but there is a process to allow for certain levels of kennels in town that have a fee structure. I'm not sure where that stands. So that's why I recommended to go to the bylaw, because I don't know if the bylaw needs to be tweaked, but it has nothing to do with the licensing, because there already is a process in place to charge a fee.
Mike, is Jeannie in the meeting? Because
Yes, she is.
from what Tom's saying, it sounds like the clerk's office has a process for this, but as you will recall, I'm sure, when this matter first came up, there was an awful lot of conversation between you and me and Mary. And my understanding was that your office was only issuing business certificates, and that's why this or dog licenses and business certificates for these daycare centers. So I don't know where the proper place for it to land. Maybe Tom's right, that it should go to bylaw or should go to some council committee. I'm just trying to solve a problem because I think we have people that are in violation of state law through no fault of their own.
And thank you, Mike. And I agree with Mary. I mean, it needs to fall somewhere to be discussed and to put these pieces together, because there definitely is a disconnect. And as we all know, we've certainly had a lot of changes, and COVID has not made it easy for any of our town departments to function in normal fashion. But the bottom line is we have a process that was used in the past. We also have a bylaw that is not in tune with the licensing that is already taking place. So we really need to put these two together. And I don't know if that's just something that maybe Mary wants to handle and put together a committee, or if it goes to the bylaw committee. I mean, I just want this resolved as Mary does.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. We have a second. Maybe, Tom, could you read that motion again that was seconded?
Well, the motion was to move this discussion to the bylaw committee for consideration, to not necessarily, I mean, to at least hash this out and discuss the process for putting the two in sync, the licensing in the clerk's office and the bylaw, which is part of the zoning bylaw, which would fall under the bylaw committee.
Okay, so I just wanted to make that clear to everyone. Ralph, I believe you seconded that motion to enable discussion, and we're at a point right now. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, then we can vote on the motion that's on the floor. Don Anderson?
No.
Marilyn?
Yes.
Not trying to put anyone on the spot here. Tom?
Yes.
Pat?
Yes.
Kathy?
Yes.
Ralph?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. Okay, so that motion passes 6-1. It can go to bylaw. Bylaw can look at it. They can send it back to the council. But I'm sure we'll figure out a path going forward and have a good resolution hopefully here. So,
Michael, can I ask a quick question? I'm sorry.
Absolutely.
Okay. Through the chair, I heard just recently that, okay, that there are private kennels and that they are currently not licensed. Is that correct, Tom? If I may.
No, they are licensed.
They are licensed. Okay.
Well, they were licensed. I don't know what's going on with the current practice, Marilyn. So
this is, new to me. And I just went through the zoning bylaw looking to see if we even have a definition for a private kennel, which we do not. At least I couldn't find it. And so, I was reluctant to vote because I wasn't sure what I wanted to play out, but certainly there are a number of questions that need to be answered to streamline this process. But whether it's the bylaw committee or whether it's the planning board, that's the issue that I was struggling with too, because the planning board needs to be involved in the issue of their zoning bylaw. So I need to put that out there. It's not just our bylaw committee. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Kathy, did you have?
I have two comments because I don't know the answer to the first one, and that is, as Ralph has stated, the Palmer Kennel on Porter Road there, or Porter Road, whatever their name is, was grandfathered in years ago. So going forward, when this assignment gets resolved and we have a standing on how to proceed, would a business or an entity like the Porter Road facility, because they were grandfathered, would they be exempt from paying the kennel fee? just something to consider. And as Marilyn has echoed, this appears to be, with the exception of Tom, maybe because he's spent a number of years as the animal control officer. For the rest of us, this is like new, uncharted waters. We haven't had that experience before. And I'm wondering if, Jeannie, maybe somebody from your side can look to other towns to say, you know, do you have a fee schedule for your kennels within your municipality, just to get a ballpark idea of how do we set a number here? I mean, we'd be just picking a number out of the lottery barrel without some kind of parameters from neighboring or communities of our size somewhere in the Commonwealth, just as to give us some parameters for discussion points.
Yeah.
Did you have your hand up, or you?
Well, I think, again, there's a lot of miscommunication, and there's a lot of misinformation. And I think it's best that it be brought to the subcommittee for discussion so that we can hash this all out, because Porter Road Kennel does pay a fee today. They pay a fee of $100, but they are grandfathered in. And the other kennels in the past have paid a fee dependent on how many dogs they had. And the reason that was put in place was for a couple different reasons. And I'd go into another 20 minutes of conversation if I got into it. So I think we said enough.
Pat?
Thank you, Mike. I think the bylaw committee is the right place for this, and I'm glad we voted that way. The bylaw committee is really a bylaw review committee, not meant to write bylaws as it is to review them.
Right.
And it also covers bylaws from zoning. So it's all bylaws, not just general bylaws. So sure, we may not write anything, but we're the place to start the discussion instead of doing it with all of us here.
Right. I agree. You know, that committee can take a look at it and uncover a lot of areas that we all agree we don't have a large amount of expertise in, as Kathy stated. We're in uncharted waters, and that's the purpose of sending it over there. And I'm sure we'll, you know, come up with the right product in the end that suits everyone's best interest. So, okay. Under new business, our next discussion is for street acceptances. That topic came up at our last council meeting. I can tell you that there has been some dialogue amongst Bruce, Tom, and Bethany. We're trying to create a path forward here regarding street acceptance. I would just add, being part of those conversations, that we could visit Mass General Laws for guidance to start. Procedures could include, after reviewing MGL, the DPW would have to approve the construction. If the construction was approved, they would notify planning. Planning would notify our council that the street meets the criteria for acceptance. At that point, our town attorney would have to verify deed language, the authors that would, you know, be part of that deed, and seeing that Mary has replaced town meeting, it would have to be signed off by Mary. Our council would have to vote to accept the street at that point in time, I believe. And the documents would have to be recorded at the Registry of Deeds prior to releasing the bond. But right now, this is preliminary. This is where we have them. I'm open to any suggestions or any information that anyone can offer, and I'll start with Don.
All right. The way it's always been, and I think we have a good history, a good path for this. As every town meeting that I've been to, we always have had street acceptance. Now, typically there's a fair amount of money being held, okay? And so where's the impetus? The impetus is the developer who wants his or her money returned, okay? So they would get the requisite signatures and try to bring it before the town meeting. And that it would go to the planning board. And the planning board would have to do a recommendation, a yes or no, before the town meeting, usually asked at the behest of the moderator. But as part of getting to that conclusion, the planning board would refer the matter to the DPW to do an analysis of whether the work has been done, whether it was built to the town standards, whether any particular requirements that the bond was held for has been in compliance, and if not, take care of it. And then it would go to the town meeting, and the town meeting would get a recommendation that the planning board has approved, the votes to recommend, and then the town meeting would vote. Well, the town meeting now is the council. So, and we have a lot of streets that have very small bonds where we do not have developers knocking on the doors to get that money back, but we still have streets that were approved by the planning board under subdivision control and have not been, they're still under these small bonds, and they really should become town streets. So what probably should be done is the planning board should review the list and make recommendations to go to the town council about accepting these streets. And again, as in the past, have the DPW actively involved and get a recommendation from the DPW whether they support that or not. And then we can run the language of acceptance and so forth through the town attorney for, you know, as you mentioned. But I believe the impetus in this particular case is not going to be coming from developers. They would have been knocking on the door the last 5 years of trying to get that money back to them. And that's not the case. It has to come from the planning board. I think the process has already been is in place. We just changed the town meeting to the town council. And we're fortunate to have two other former planning board chairs in our group. So through our president, maybe they would like to chime in.
Okay. Marilyn?
I absolutely agree with what Don has just said. The work is between the planning board and the DPW. And as soon as it's determined that the street meets the town's requirements, then it comes to us and we take action. You know, I don't think we need to make this any more complicated than it already is.
Okay. Ralph?
So Mike, I think what the council needs to look for is we have streets out there that have either no bond left or such a minimal bond that it won't cover the completion of the street. Mm-hmm. So what we need is a list of those streets, a list of how much is left on the bond, if anything, and then the council needs to step back and think, you know, are we going to accept this street in the condition that it's in, knowing that we only have so much left on the bond, and chances are the town's going to have to foot the bill. I believe we had to foot the bill, if I remember, at town meeting once on, I think it was Rollins Street off of Parker, where there was no bond money left and the street was in disrepair. We had to top coat the whole street in order to accept it. We may have to do that, but we need a list of these streets and what bonds and all are left. I think that's really where we need to start. If we don't know all the different streets, we don't know what we're looking at.
Right. We need a process, and we have a process. I believe the process I somewhat described, and it's in negotiation stages. You know, we all have a recollection of what's been done in the past, and basically I was substituting our manager for the Board of Selectmen and us voting, you know, replacing town meeting. But it starts with, if we want to know what the damage is going to be, like you said, how much bond money is there, and how much is it going to cost to complete the road. I'm familiar with this whole process, and that way we can repair any deficiencies that we might see in the past that might cost the town money when we accept these roads, because either the bond, not enough bond money was put up, or too much of it was released prematurely. Does anyone else have anything they would like to add? I can tell you that I believe that, you know, Bruce and Tom are probably in the audience. we've been working on this, and I could ask Tom to elaborate on the subject matter, but I did see your hand up again, Don.
Yeah, basically, I think the point guard, if you will, to use a basketball analogy, should be the planning board. And I think the planning board, we should ask as a council or through the town manager to say, take a look at this list, do what we used to do, because again, it was a very effective process, and review the list, reach out to DPW on this, and basically be the clearinghouse to clear the streets that they feel are ready for us to accept. And the ones that aren't quite there, I think we really have to work on trying to eventually accept them, because I can tell you, the people that, if we've approved the street under subdivision control, I don't believe anyone's saving a dime on their taxes because they're on an approved street, but not an accepted street. And we owe it to the citizens of East Long Meadow, who are paying good tax money, that their streets should be maintained and not be penalized as a function of releasing money or not collecting enough money too early.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Does anyone else have any other questions at this point in time? Okay,
Mike,
so Marilyn?
Did we want to hear from Bruce Denny and Tom Christensen? Is there, I mean, they're in the audience. I didn't know if that was a possibility before we.
It is, and I figured that we put our questions out there first so that they can digest them. They're in the audience, and I would ask Don Mackey to bring in Tom Christensen. Tom worked on this today. Like I said, there was dialogue amongst Bruce, Tom, Bethany, Mary, myself, and but I'll bring Tom in right now, and he can add to this or answer any additional questions that one might have. So, Don, if you could bring him in, please.
Yeah, they're on their way.
Thank you.
I'll bring them all.
Hi, Tom.
Good evening.
So I was trying to lay out a path that was discussed, and I do believe it was very similar to the past. In short, obviously DPW has to look at the work and see what's done and let the planning board know where we sit. So we're familiar with the process, but maybe you can elaborate on the conversation that's taken place tonight, and then that will open up maybe some further discussion or questions that council members might have.
Okay, Bruce, you want to start?
Yeah. I know probably about a year and a half ago, I did meet with the council, and one of the items on my to-do list, like many other, was to wrap up these old bonds and outstanding bonds, especially in the subdivision category. There are a couple paper streets. So I've been working with the developers specifically to get these issues resolved. And like Mr. Anderson said, to get these streets accepted, get the bonds released in an orderly fashion. So I have been in contact, and I can say that most of these incomplete projects will be completed this year. I can't tell you if all of them will be, but I have been in contact with every developer, and they assured me that these projects will be completed at some point in time this year.
Great. So it's fair to say that a list will be compiled, and then we can figure out how much bond money is attached to these specific roads and how much work is left with a price tag attached to it, so we can see the offset. Is that fair?
Yeah, excuse me, Mike. I do have a list already compiled with all the outstanding items that are left on each project with the balance that I can forward to you or the council if you so desire.
I'm sure Mary would want to take a look at that. So maybe you could forward a list to myself and Mary, and then we'll decide where we send it from there and what kind of action we want to take going forward. Tom O'Connor?
If I may, through the chair, Bruce?
Yes.
When you keep referring, and maybe this is just me not quite understanding, you keep referring to be completed by the end of this year. What do you actually mean by that statement?
Is to obviously get these projects, these outstanding subdivisions mainly completed by the developer and get the streets accepted and in front of you.
Okay.
Is that
There,
clear?
there are, what about the instances where I'm aware of at least 2 streets that have been in use for many years,
Mhm.
where the developer is no longer available or approachable. So what's your plan to deal with that issue?
I haven't run into that yet, Tom. I've actually talked to every developer that is on the list that have outstanding bonds. So that hasn't been an issue yet, Tom. I mean, hopefully that answers your question.
Well, my question still is, what do we plan to do? Because I know, and I don't want to speak for anyone else, but there is at least one street where there is no bond money available and the street was never taken.
Right. I really don't know legally what I can do with that process. At this time, I don't have a legal, opinion on how to move forward with something like that, Tom.
So yeah, so we have no option to go after the former developer.
Right.
In this case, it's not a current developer.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Mike, to the things that Tom is referring to, I mean, if there are specific streets or issues or developers, I mean, maybe you could put those in writing to me, and between Bruce and I and Bethany and Tom, we could consult with town council and find out if there's a remedy. But if we know the specifics, I'm happy to look into any particular case and get an answer as quickly as we can.
Exactly, I would agree. We need the totality of the entire situation, the streets, the bond money, and the amounts to complete. Ralph?
So Mike, I was just going to elaborate. I wasn't sure if there's a list of streets that aren't taken. I know there's one where there's bond money still available in the street, but I'm just talking throughout the whole town, whether there's no bond money left or, for some reason it wasn't taken or something. I'm just wondering if we have that, because at that point, like I said, it may have to come to the council and we may have to look at what do we need to spend as a town to bring the street up to compliance so that we can accept it, so that we can start getting Chapter 90 money.
Tom?
So that, Ralph, is a very large number that I don't even know that anybody could quantify at this point. Lots were being developed on paper streets without any bonding or ramifications whatsoever for a very long time. We're not allowing that anymore, but there are portions of streets that people just paved 100 feet, 100 feet, 100 feet just to have pavement to get to their driveway. Mike Ray has done a very good job on GIS denoting what we know has been accepted and what hasn't, but without probably the help of a large part of the community, I don't know how we're going to come up with that list.
Okay. Does anyone else have any other questions at this point in time? Bruce?
Yeah, just to elaborate on Mr. Page's question. So it's quite a list, Ralph. There's 104 paper and private streets in town, roughly 9.2 miles. And if you quantify that in today's, if the Department of Public Works had to go out and do the work, it's roughly about $350 a foot. And your typical right-of-way is, your street's roughly 24 and say 5 feet on each side. So that equals, if we wanted to get those streets up to today's standards, is roughly about $17,164. And that doesn't include, obviously, doing surveying, doing deeds, and things like that to delineate those properties in order for the town to accept those streets. So it's a preliminary list, and I know this was discussed in previous council meetings, I believe a year and a half ago. So I did have Mike Ray run this list to just get a barometer of where we are when it comes to private and paper streets.
Don?
One suggestion is what we did with Rollins is we didn't we accepted the street, but the street was not the town standards. What our standards at the time were requiring sidewalks. And to make it work, we did the only sidewalk waiver I can remember in my tenure on the planning board, and because the town was eating the cost of it.
Right.
My suggestion is on these paper streets, if we're going down that route, pardon the pun, would be to make the streets safe for the town,
Right.
but realizing we're not going to build it to town standards, but to make it acceptable so that the taxpayers can expect the services of, plowing and trash pickup to the extent it's, they can do that, but not to, I think we need to consider what we did as historically with the town with Rollins, is to say the greater good for the town would be to look at what's essential to make the streets safe, not necessarily hit every check mark on our wish list for street width and other standards. So just a thought out there.
Okay, thank you.
Ralph?
And so, Mike, I just wanted to note, I know there's a lot of paper streets that are in the GIS and all that aren't developed. I mean, when you drive by, although it says it's a paper street, it looks like someone's front lawn, side yard or whatever. Those aren't the areas that I was talking about. I'm talking about like what Tom said, where the street was extended 100 feet to get another building lot in. Well, technically, that should have been put in, that asphalt, to town standards. That should have been 100 foot of street, and that should have been in front of the town to be accepted. Not saying that everything's always done the way it should be. We all know that a lot of times you're just fixing stuff from the past. But as far as to put in all paper streets and all like that, no, that's not something we're going to do. So, I mean, I'm guessing that's probably half of that list. But again, even a few $1 million is a lot of money to try and bring these up so that we can accept them. I was just wondering if there was a general idea out there, and obviously there is, and it's a lot more than I expected.
Mm-hmm. I just want to bring up a number that Bruce threw out there, and I don't know, not everybody puts roads in and develops property, so it might have went over their heads, but we're talking basically, Bruce, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the number we used at $350, that's per foot. That is to pave 1 foot of a road. So if you're trying to obviously put a cost to it, you'd have to measure the entire length of the road, the entire width of the road. And then you're getting an idea where this number on the projects that are outlined out there come to in the $17 million range. Is that a fair statement, Bruce?
Yes, but this includes all the infrastructure as well, because when it comes to impervious surface, you have stormwater. This is the water utilities, the sewer, and everything else that goes along with that, though. So that price is included in my estimate.
Right. So, okay, well, I know we have some direction here. We're gonna, Bruce and the team, Bethany, Tom, can work on a list, and we can see how much bond money's sitting on the shelf and how much money it's going to cost to repair. I would suggest that list, if somebody could copy me on that list and send a copy to Mary, if that's acceptable to Mary, it's a starting place, and then we can hone in on exactly what we want to prioritize and try to provide a level of service to our residents. Any other questions on the subject matter? Okay, thank you all for chiming in, Bethany, Tom, Bruce, and to be continued.
Thank you.
Okay. Under new business, we're going to continue on with our subcommittee for our bylaws that I believe Pat is going to make a presentation to us tonight and bring us up to date.
Thank you, Mike. Yes, since you all received my update on Friday, I won't belabor it, just pick up a few of the highlights. This is a complete revision of all town bylaws, including zoning and traffic regulations, which was begun several years ago by former town clerk Tom Florence. It's nearly 95% complete, the project is. At 480 pages long, this was a very time-consuming task, and I want to express my sincere appreciation to the committee that worked on this. the final draft. It is the judgment of the committee that in the final draft, no new material changes were made or suggested during this last phase of the project. We submitted the changes that we made, which again were mostly editorial or corrections to General Code on January 22nd in order to meet the contract deadline. The project is now at this point on hold. We cannot adopt the project until the charter changes are approved by the voters in June. Once the voters approve the modification of the charter language in June, the bylaw committee can create a document describing the code project as a whole and identifying the material changes. The bylaw committee intends to work collaboratively with the town clerk and the town attorney to create the document that will meet the new language's requirements for transparency, for full transparency. And those requirements haven't even yet been exactly nailed down, but whatever they are, we'll work together with them. The document will then be presented to the council for their approval to proceed. And then there'll be public hearings and so forth. I don't want to get into the weeds with the details since this body has already seen and approved the material changes back in January last year. And we've made the new material change, and we've made no new material changes, just corrections. Anybody have any questions on the status of the project or our delay?
I would just add one piece that like you said, this coincides with charter review. And, you know, they had their last formal meeting a week ago, Tuesday, and we're waiting for documentation to be prepared. And, you know, that'll provide your committee with a path forward so that we can bring some resolution after it's obviously attached to the town ballot in the spring. Any other questions for Pat? All right, appreciate the update, and we appreciate all the work yourself and your committee put into this project to bring it to the level it's at today. So thank you again. Action items for our next meeting. I think you're probably all aware I've been communicating with Senator Lesser's office, and they will be joining us on March 9th. Coming into the budget season, I would say we could expect at least 2 council meetings during the month of January as we approach the April 1st deadline. We talked about documents for road acceptance coming forward, and I'm sure we'll learn a little bit more about kennel licenses. So those would be our action items. I don't know if anyone else has anything they want to add to that. I don't see any hands up. So there is no executive session planned for tonight's meeting. So I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
And I will second that.
Motion's been made and seconded. I'm sure there's no discussion on this topic. So we'll start with Marilyn.
Yes.
Yes, as well. Kathy?
Yes.
Everyone's smiling now. Ralph?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Pat?
Yes.
And Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
Thank you all for joining us. It's as simple as looking at the time. It is 7:48. We can consider ourselves adjourned, and we'll see you soon. Thank you for joining in.
Thank you, everyone. Stay safe.
Good night.